What's up, YouTube? In this video, we're going to be answering the question, what is the best investment account for me to be opening and funding in order to be able to reach my goal of building generational wealth for my children? This is going to be an extremely important video if you're a parent and just had a kid, or maybe you have kids already, and one of your biggest goals is providing them with a better financial future or better head start financially compared to the one that you had. In this video, we're going to break down the different types of investment accounts for children, and stick around to the end because at the end, I'm going to reveal which one of these is best for you. Quick intro, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jose Hernandez. I have an online financial education company that serves first generation wealth builders, people like you and me, people the first person in their family to think about investing or start investing. And my mission is to help people learn how to invest for their financial freedom and also build that generational wealth for their family, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Got my start in the wealth management industry as a financial advisor, where I earned my Series 7 and 66 licenses and learned all the things I've been sharing on social media every single day for years now, helping thousands of first generation wealth builders across the globe. So let's dive into today's video. Like I said, we're going to be talking about what is the best investment account for you to be funding right now if your goal is to build that generational wealth for your children. So like I said, we're going to start off with the three primary types of investment accounts for kids. We're going to break down the pros and cons, and then at the end, we're going to reveal which one is best for you. So let's start off with state 529 plans. State 529 plans are a common tool that are used by parents. And the thing about these types of investment accounts is they're designed primarily for education. So if your goal is to fund your child's education, this particular type of investment account may be one that you want to consider using. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of state 529 plans. So one of the biggest benefits of 529 plans is their tax benefits. And there's several layers to the tax benefits that can be provided from a state 529 plan. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with a client who is now a father, just had a baby, and one of his goals is to provide his kid with basically his kid not having to pay for college education. He happens to live in the state of Illinois, and the state of Illinois plan actually provides residents of Illinois with a tax break on their state income tax return for the state of Illinois if they contribute to the state 529 plan. So not all states offer this, and it kind of depends because each state has their own rules as to how their 529 plan works. But at a high level, there are some plans that can help you save a little bit of money on tax on your state income tax return if you contribute to that state's 529 plan, Illinois being one example of that. Another thing to consider about 529 plans is they usually have a small impact on the child's FAFSA application. So basically, if you're banking on them having to need federal student aid to go to college, this type of account has a much lower impact when they're filling out that FAFSA form that helps them determine how much federal student aid they're eligible for compared to other types of accounts that we're going to be talking about today. Also, one of the biggest changes to 529 plans that went into effect this year is after some time, you can actually start rolling over unused 529 plan money from the child's 529 plan to their Roth IRA. And this is a pretty big deal because a lot of people in the past were concerned, what if there's money in the 529 plan after they go to school or they don't go to school? What are my options? This is a little bit of an incentive where if you do have unused money in that 529 plan, you may be able to start rolling it over to the child's Roth IRA, and that money can be used for the retirement. I might do a completely separate video on that specific rule, but just for the time being, know that that is a potential pro of the state 529 plan. And then, of course, if one of your goals is to help your kid go through private school, if that's something that's important to you, a couple years ago, there was a change made to 529 plans because in the past, 529 plans were only used for college or higher education. But in a lot of states, you can use up to $10,000 from that 529 plan to fund private K through 12 tuition. So that can be a big help if, maybe for you, getting your kid through private school is important to you. You don't want them to go to public school and you think private school is the way for them to go. You can use the money in a lot of states inside the 529 plan to fund up to $10,000 per year to help out with that hefty tuition bill. Another thing to consider about 529 plans is they can be transferred to a direct relative. So maybe your oldest child doesn't decide to go to college and there's a good amount of money in that 529 plan, you're able to transfer that directly to maybe a sibling or a direct relative, or even to yourself if you decide to go to grad school or something like that. So they can be transferred as long as the new beneficiary is directly related to the original beneficiary. And last thing on the tax benefits. So when it comes to these investment accounts, of course, the money can be invested. That money can grow without being taxed, which is a huge deal. And if the money is used for qualified educational expenses, things like tuition and books and things of that nature, the money can come out completely tax-free on the back end. So it's kind of like a Roth IRA, but it's used for education. And of course, it has much higher contribution limits compared to the Roth IRA. So those are the pros of the 529 plan in a nutshell. Let's talk about some of the cons now. So one of the biggest cons of the 529 plan is the money must be used for qualified educational expenses. So you can't just take the money and go buy, a BMW or something like that. In most states, that's not going to fly, because what happens is if you pull the money out of this account and use that money for anything other than qualified educational expenses, taxes and a 10% early withdrawal, not early withdrawal penalty, it's not a retirement account, but a 10% penalty can be assessed on the earnings, the gains on that money that you withdraw for the non-qualified educational expense. So something that's not related to what the account is designed to be used for, that's where those taxes and penalties can be assessed. So you got to be really careful and be mindful of the fact that this money is designed to be used for education. Another thing is, again, every 529 plan is different, and there's different financial institutions that sponsor or administer 529 plans. But in a lot of cases, your investment options in most 529 plans, at least, are going to be pretty limited, right? You're usually going to get a mix of different like target date funds you can choose from, maybe some stock mutual funds, some bond mutual funds, some age-based funds potentially, but you usually don't have a ton of freedom in terms of the investments that you can choose inside the 529 plan. So that's one thing to consider. And like I mentioned, the taxes and penalties can be a big con if you decide to use this money for anything other than qualified educational expenses. So this means that you have to be really careful and thoughtful as to how and why you're funding this account on the front end. So that's 529s. Let's move on to the next common type of investment account that you can use to fund your child's generational wealth, that being our classic custodial accounts, these being the UGMA and the UTMA. I'm lumping these together because they're very similar. There are some small differences between the two, which we're not really going to cover in this video because I'm trying to keep this at a high level. But the custodial account at a high level is designed for you to start investing and building wealth for your child. And while the child is still a minor, they typically have no control or access to the money. So you're kind of protecting them from having access to all this money when they're too young to use it. But by law, once the minor reaches what's called age of majority, which in plain English just means they're considered an adult by the state, the account must be transferred to them. So we'll talk about that here in just one second. But in a nutshell, if one of your goals is to build wealth for your child while they're still a minor, and you want them to get a specific amount of money once they reach a specific age, usually 18, 21, 25, depending on the type of account that we're talking about here, this might be a suitable type of investment account for you to use for your child. So let's dive into the pros and cons of the custodial accounts, again, the UGMA and UTMA. One of the biggest things that parents like with these types of accounts is typically the child has no control or access to the money while they're still a minor. So they can't just pull the money out and go do something silly with it, right? It's the account, in a sense, is designed to protect the minor from themselves and other people as well. And usually in these custodial accounts, compared to other types of accounts for children like the 529, you have a lot more control and flexibility and freedom over the types of investments that you can own and the types of assets that can be placed inside of these accounts, right? You can own stocks, index funds, ETFs, REITs, alternative investments in a lot of cases. So a lot more freedom. And in some cases, like with the UTMA, real estate can even be placed inside of these accounts. So a lot more flexibility in terms of the investment options compared to like the state 529 plan, for example. And like I said, these accounts are really designed to protect the child because the account, number one, by law, must be managed in the best interest of the minor. So it's all about the child here. The money must be managed in a way that only benefits the child, is another way of saying that. And it also is protected in a lot of cases, maybe there's a nasty divorce or something like that. That money is still designed to be used for the minor. There's usually no kind of intervention there where like someone gets half of that, right? So a lot of parents that are concerned about that think about this account for that reason. So the UGMA and UTMA was really designed to be almost like a simpler version of a trust, basically, and a much more inexpensive version of a trust. So if you want that control while the child is still a minor, but you are okay with that money being transferred to them once they are an adult, this might be a suitable investment account for you to use. Now let's talk about some of the cons. So I just mentioned the fact that the account must be transferred to the child once they're a certain age. Some parents don't like that, right? Some parents want to retain control of the money for as long as they decide to be in control of that money, basically. So the age of majority, or the age the state considers a child to be an adult, depends on the type of account and also the state. Usually with UGMAs, that age of majority is around 18, whereas with UTMAs, it's usually a little bit older. It can be up to 21 or even 25 in some states. But by law, in either case, once that child is no longer a child and is now an adult, by according to the state, that money, that account must be transferred to them. And at that point, they can do whatever they want with it. So if you're going down this route, it's up to you, the parent, to make sure that you're educating your child, that is, on how to manage their money responsibly, how to invest their money responsibly. That way you don't spend all these years saving and busting your tail to grow the wealth in this account, all for it to just go down the drain. Another thing to consider here is, unlike the 529 plan, the custodial account can have a much bigger impact on the child's FAFSA application. So if one of the things for you that's important to you for your child is for them to qualify for federal student aid, this type of account can have a much bigger impact on their eligibility for that federal student aid compared to something like the 529 plan, for example. Another thing, it's a little bit of a smaller detail, but it's still important depending on your situation, is the kiddie tax can apply to the custodial accounts, which means you want to be really efficient and careful about the taxes that are being generated inside these accounts, basically. And then the final kind of big point here with the custodial accounts is any money or assets that are placed into these types of accounts are considered irrevocable. Irrevocable is just a fancy way of saying there's no takebacks. So if your child makes you upset or whatever, and you put $10,000 of assets into this account, you can't be like, hey, you know what, I'm taking that $10,000 back. That applies to anyone that's funding this account. And typically anyone can add assets or money into these accounts, but you have to be careful and you have to be understanding of the fact that once that money is in the account, there's no takebacks, because now that money must be managed in the best interest of the beneficiary, aka the minor. So those are custodial accounts in a nutshell. Let's go over the last kind of primary investment account for your child, and this is the custodial Roth IRA. And this can be a really, really beneficial account for you to use for them, but it's not as straightforward as the first two, because in order to qualify for this, we'll talk about this more in 1 second, the child must have earned income. They need to have some form of actively earned income through some form of employment in order for them to be able to qualify for this type of account. Whereas the other two accounts we just talked about, that's not an issue. But the custodial Roth IRA can be a huge deal for a number of reasons. And let's walk through some of these pros and cons together. So of course, one of the biggest pros of a custodial Roth IRA, similar to a Roth IRA for yourself, is not only can the money be invested, that money can grow without being taxed. And down the road, once the child meets the requirements, all of the gains inside that account can be withdrawn completely tax and penalty free. So for example, let's say that you start that account off with $0 and you're consistently helping them fund that account over time and they're maxing it out. And let's say that account goes from 0 to $1 million. If the child meets the requirements down the road at retirement, that full amount can be withdrawn completely tax and penalty free. So that's a huge, huge deal. And this is a great way for you to help your child start building for their future retirement down the road. Like I said, that tax-free withdrawals of your investment growth, or their investment growth in this case, is a huge plus. As a refresher, the requirements for tax-free withdrawals from any Roth IRA, including a custodial Roth IRA, is the owner must be at least age 59 and a half, and the account must be open and funded for at least 5 years. But again, this is a great benefit for those of you that are wanting to help your children build that tax-free wealth for the future. And of course, there's a lot of flexibility with the investment options in this account as well. Just like in your own Roth IRA and a custodial Roth IRA, you can invest in all sorts of things: index funds, ETFs, individual stocks, REITs, mutual funds, the list goes on. Now let's talk about some of the cons, because even though it is a great investment account, there are definitely some things to consider. Like I just mentioned a second ago, one of the biggest requirements for you to be able to open and start funding this account is your child must have earned income. And this can be pretty straightforward. Maybe if they're a teenager and they have like some sort of summer job. So me personally, when I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's. So I could pay for my baseball tournament dues, so I could play travel baseball and get scouted to go to college, and pay for gas and stuff like that. So I wasn't aware of the Roth IRA at the time because I was focused on other things. But it's a lot more straightforward if maybe they're old enough to have some sort of job, or maybe they're mowing lawns or something like that. The biggest thing is they have to earn, if you want to help them max out the Roth IRA in this tax year, currently in 2024, in order to max that out, they need at least $7,000 of earned income. So if they only make $3,000, you can only add up to $3,000 to the account. If they make $10,000, you can add the full $7,000, but the minimum that they have to make in order to max out the account basically is that $7K. Where this gets tricky is if they're really young. Sometimes business owners that I work with can get a little bit creative with this and basically put their child on payroll. And if it's structured correctly, they can deduct the amount that they pay their child from salary as a part of payroll, and that money can be invested. So there's all sorts of great things that can happen here, but you have to be careful because the IRS needs to believe that the compensation or the money that the child is making is reasonable. So if you have a 2-year-old and on your company's books, you have them as like a sales representative or something like that, and you're paying them a $7,000 salary, that's probably not going to fly with the IRS. Now, there's other ways you can get creative, but the main thing is it needs to be reasonable, and you don't want to cheat the IRS on this. And another con here is there's a relatively low contribution limit, the $7,000 in 2024. So if you're wanting to invest more, you're only allowed to put up to that $7,000, again, assuming that they have a minimum of $7,000 they earn themselves. And once you hit that limit, you're kind of done with this type of account. And then there's probably other opportunities like some of the other accounts we talked about so far. But in a nutshell, the custodial Roth IRA, if you can swing it, can be a really beneficial type of investment account for you to help your child start building that generational wealth, specifically though for retirement. I didn't list this as a con, but I should have, right? Just like with your own Roth IRA, if the money's not used for, if you don't qualify for the tax-free withdrawals, right? So if they're not at least age 59 and a half, and the account's been open and funded for at least 5 years, if they withdraw that money prematurely, taxes and penalties could potentially apply on the earnings that they withdraw from that account. So that is a potential con. It's not just for custodial Roth IRAs, it's for your Roth IRA as well. But just wanted to mention that briefly. So we've covered the 3 primary types of investment accounts for children. Now it's time to answer, well, which one of these is best for you, right? And the answer, of course, is it depends. It's going to depend on a number of things, right? But the best thing that you can do, and this is a conversation I have with clients and students all the time, is you want to make sure that your investment accounts, including the investment accounts that you're funding for your kids, match up with the goals that you have for yourself and maybe even your kids, and also your personal preferences and tax pictures. So for example, if you're wanting to fund the account for education, then maybe the 529 plan makes sense. But if you're worried about that money not being able to be used for something other than education, then maybe the 529 plan does make sense. If you're worried about the fact that the UGMA must be transferred to the child once they're an adult, then maybe the UGMA, UTMA isn't the best solution. Or if you're worried about the child needing to rely on federal student aid to go to college, and you're worried about the impact that the UGMA or UTMA could have on that FAFSA application, then maybe the UGMA and UTMA isn't the best choice, right? So as you can see, there's a number of things that you need to consider here, but at the end of the day, it's about matching up the investment accounts that you're funding, both for yourself, but also for your children, with your specific goals, your tax picture, and your personal preferences, because that's the key at the end of the day. So let's talk next steps. If you're watching this and you're a parent, and one of your biggest goals financially and in your life is to build that generational wealth for your children, make sure that they get a better head start in life than the one that you had maybe, or you want to provide them with a specific amount of wealth that you can pass down, but you still need help learning how to do it the right way. What you can do is, in the description to this video, you'll find a link to schedule a one-on-one call with myself. We can sit down and have a conversation more around your goals and what you're looking to accomplish, and we can talk about more options that you have and how I can help. So again, the link to that is in the description to this video. But that's going to be all for me in this video. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, did, make sure you give it a like, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.